You're listening to Keith Engle, the host of TGI Sports Talk on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel.
Good morning, everybody. Keith Engle here for TGI Sports One-on-One with Keith Engle, our interview show that we do every Friday morning. And we've had some great guests up till now. And by the way, I'll give you an update in a second. I want to welcome everybody watching this morning on TGI Sports Talk's Facebook page, our YouTube page. We're live on Roku on the National Streaming Sports Network. Get that channel downloaded, guys. Tons of great content. I mean, all day and all night, right through the night. These shows all repeat at different times during the week, and every night at midnight I have a repeat show of some. Let me turn that music down. So make sure you check that out. And I thank all the groups that allow me to share these interviews and all my shows as well. Real quick, I want to thank my guest, Jim Beringer from FullPressHockey.com, Brett Saberhagen from the week before, Vita Pinson Jr. from the week before. Everybody's been on so far. Let me give you a little idea. Our guest today will be Mike Bass, as you can see at the bottom of the show, former Washington Redskins cornerback, part of their Hall of Fame. In the next few weeks, we got Brian McRae, former MLB outfielder, son of Hal McRae, coming on. 16th, we still got a little bit open. The 23rd, Sidney Moncrief, former Arkansas and Milwaukee Buck great. And then Ernie DiGregorio, great start, Providence here in the Northeast, and a real big start, at least for a short period of time, with the Buffalo Braves. So a lot of good stuff coming up. Thumbs up, DDH. Good to have you watching us from above today, I should say. And we'll get right to it. Mike Bass, went to Michigan, former, as I said, I think, very good, very, very good cornerback with the Washington Redskins. Had a very famous play in the Super Bowl, which we'll get to. Played a few years before injuries caught up with him. He was kind of a young guy in George Allen's older approach to the game, if you will, the Over the Hill gang. Mike was one of the young guys in that Over the Hill gang, but we'll get into all of that. And with no further ado, let me bring in Mr. Mike Bass. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Keith. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everybody who takes the time to come on with me and spend a little while talking about their careers, and my audience just eats it up. And guys, as we get going through this, and I know we'll have people joining us throughout the hour, and we'll get to your comments if they kind of fit the moment we're talking, and I'll put them up. If not, we'll get back to them and get all of your questions to Mike. I promise that. And we'll say good morning to Dave Guyette, who's always the first one in the room. Good morning, Mike, up there in Amsterdam. Mike, let's start. I want to start at kind of the beginning. So you grew up in Michigan. I cannot say, please tell me the name of this. How do you It's called Ypsilanti. Ypsilanti. Sounds a lot easier when you say Ypsilanti. It's about 7 miles from Ann Arbor itself. Okay. And 30 miles or so west of Detroit. Small town? Small town, but now it has a major university, Eastern Michigan University. Oh, okay. Is right there in Ypsilanti. Interesting. And, so we're very proud of Ypsilanti, our little town, which is obviously not that little. And we've had some good athletes that have come out of Ypsilanti itself. Who's some of the other guys besides yourself? You know something off the top of your head that have come out? Well, years ago, Lawrence Perry, who was an All-American at the University of Michigan. Yeah. Also, there was a tight end who played for the Lions, but before then, I think he was with the Bengals. Oh, Rodney Holman. Oh, yeah. I remember Rodney Holman. Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, when he was just a little boy, we lived right across the street from each other. Oh, really? Yep. I graduated from high school with his older sister. And so that name is synonymous with the NFL as well. There have been several others, but Rodney is the one that comes to mind at this point. Interesting. I'm always interested in guys who grow up in small towns. I grew up in a very small town, had a graduating class of like 53 people. So, and the people I know and hang around with, they all had, 800, 900 people in their graduating class. They're like, no way, 53? Yeah. In high school, growing up, I know you played football, basketball, track. Was football your best sport? Because I know I talked to a lot of guys where they actually ended up going wasn't necessarily their best sport.
Well, I loved basketball more than I loved football, quite frankly. And even though I was a starter on our high school team, I just was too short to play basketball. Football, of course, was my next love. And I recall when just a youngster going into junior high school, my mother said, "Well, Michael, I don't care what you do, but I just want you to go out for football," because she loved football. She absolutely was a student of the game. She didn't push me, but I could tell she really wanted me to at least go out and see if I had any kind of athleticism that would allow me to go further. And I began to love the sport as I began to have some success there in high school.
In track, what did you participate in track?
I actually ran the hurdles. At that time, they were called the 120-yard high hurdles and the 180-yard low hurdles. And I remember actually running the hurdles against Clint Jones, who went to Michigan and then went on to play football with the Vikings. But we all came out of high school that very same year, and going into the pros, 67.
Yeah. Interesting. So who were your influences, by the way, as a kid? You talked about your mom you towards football. Who are the influences that helped you develop as a young man into sports, or into a solid citizen, let's say?
Well, I was very, very fortunate. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a doctor, as a matter of fact. And so we took advantage of every opportunity that was afforded us. So we had an opportunity to really develop and find our own way. But my mother and dad emphasized education more than anything else. As a matter of fact, you always had a plan A and a plan B. And your plan A was getting good grades so that going to college was an absolute must. And so I have two younger sisters, and it was academics that made the difference. And it gave me the opportunity to qualify, you might say, for any number of schools around the country coming out of high school. So I traveled as a senior all over the country and ended up going to school 8 miles away in the University of Michigan.
That's interesting, because it leads me to my next question. Was Michigan your first choice? Was it your preference out of the gate because it was so close and it was your home?
Not really. I kind of liked California and Southern Cal, and being out of that cold weather. The winters were very bitter in Michigan.
Yeah, of course.
But when I had a chance to go to these different places, and even north to Michigan State, I ended up letting my mom and dad influence me, not by saying anything other than, boy, education sure is important. I thought, well, I think that's true, and they know a lot better than I do. And that's how I ended up choosing Michigan.
Who are some of the other schools? You mentioned Southern Cal. Who are some of the other schools recruiting you?
I had a chance to go to West Point, to Syracuse. At that time, not very many schools in the South were appealing to me under those circumstances at that time. And but it ended up a wise choice, my going to Michigan. And I really believe in the old adage that there's nothing like a Michigan man. Go blue. And I see that all over the country, everywhere I go. Go blue.
How do you feel about since we're on Michigan? I'll divert just a little bit. How do you feel about the recent success, Jim Harbaugh being there? Some of the allegations against Jim Harbaugh, which I think it's kind of look at. If you want to find, you can find something against every program. And I think Jim Harbaugh is just a polarizing guy that they wanted to any way they could get him. What are your thoughts about the recent?
Jim is his own man. And I think that's what I like about him. He made decisions that ended up being the right decisions all along the line. But he's a little polarizing. But who the hell cares? He wins. And as an athlete, and particularly an athlete in a team sport, winning is what counts. And he's done it the right way. He hasn't cheated or anything of that sort, really, even though they tried to make up things that I don't think held water. But I think everybody was, for the most part, who were being critical of him and not Michigan itself.
Don't you agree that, anything that does go on at the little, I mean, there are exceptions, but most of the things that programs are accused of, Jim Harbaugh might have been accused of, everybody's doing it to some extent. And if you decide you're going to catch somebody, you'll catch somebody.
Oh, I think that's so. I think that's so. And there's always envy and jealousy of those people or those schools or those teams that are at the top.
Yeah,
it's like crabs in a barrel. Everybody's reaching up to pull the one ahead down. But the real champions maintain that position because of hard work, self-discipline, discipline of all the members of the team. And it is the group all pulling together that wins games, and the school behind them that wins games. And in this game of football is king, and it pays a lot of salaries. And I think those academics at Michigan appreciate the success of his football team.
What are your thoughts quickly on the whole NIL situation? You think this is the right way to go? Is it a slippery slope? I mean, I agree. Maybe some of the pie needs to be shared, but it just feels like things are getting a little too out of control.
Well, quite frankly, it doesn't bother me at all. And the NIL, and it is a result of the greed of everybody else.
Agreed.
And you see, when I was in school, if you got a 4-year scholarship, it was a 4-year scholarship. But now a kid has to meet or pass his physical or her physical every year, and everything is in the hands of that coach or that school. And all it takes is stepping off the curb the wrong way, breaking an ankle or leg, and you could be done. So I don't have any problem with a kid getting whatever he can command. And what I like about it, at least in particular Michigan, that those players who had great notoriety, they didn't have any problem with sharing some of their benefits with other team members. It's hard, for example, for a lineman to get any kind of good deal, but the running backs, the receivers, the quarterbacks, and so forth. And I think that those players who are getting these great deals are understanding, as in the case of football, which is the ultimate team sport, no one can do it alone. Everyone is dependent on everyone else.
Absolutely.
And so I do not fault any of these kids for getting as much as they possibly can. And it's, again, a result of the greed of the coaches, of the schools, particularly the coaches. The coaches got millions and millions and could go anywhere that they wanted to. And they got all of these things off the backs of these kids who were getting room, board, tuition, and fees, and having to sell their football tickets just to have a bite to eat after, at 9 o'clock at night, which is the case with all kids who are in college. And they never have enough money.
Yeah. Again, those all the things you brought up, and I agree with all of that. And again, I've had to get adjust to the new reality. And you're right. The greed is what brought this about. No better evidence of that than like realignment and all these schools and the super conferences, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which I mean, it hasn't really affected the Big Ten as much. I mean, other than growing, the traditional rivalries are still there. But a lot of traditional rivalries have gone away because of these realignments. I mean, and do you feel the same way about that, or is that you think that's part of the greed of the game?
It again is centered around what is going to produce the most money, and so you lose the aspect of pure athletics when so much of it is dependent on the money. And even I don't fault anyone like yourself in having this pluralistic attitude towards that aspect. I mean, and in the beginning, I wondered, was this going to help or hurt? And I came to the conclusion that when you're sitting up there with a broken leg or knee injuries that may affect you the rest of your life, you have to get it when the iron is hot.
Yeah.
Because you're only as good as your last game. And if you can't make it to your next game, well, your school recruited 5 Mike Basses so that if you go down, they've got number 4 takes your place. And it's the same thing in the pros. So you do have to look at it from a realistic point of view. This all for one and one for all only works one way, and that's when the athlete is producing.
Great point. I have had to adjust my attitude mostly, and it was mostly garnered because I'm, turning into a crotchety old man yelling at people to get off my lawn. So, I thought what I had, and that's never coming back. So,
Yeah.
To get back on the field a little bit, your time at Michigan, you had a really good team. I know. I think your freshman year, and then not as much, but still, you beat Ohio State 2 out of 3 years. I think you were there, if I got the numbers right, which is obviously probably the most important thing at Michigan. Talk to us a little bit about the OSU Michigan rivalry and how you felt about it and what it was like then.
That rivalry with Ohio State, it was a real border war. And at the time, Woody Hayes was the coach when I was playing, and we looked at Ohio State and Michigan State in the same vein. Many of the players on Michigan's team came from Ohio, as a matter of fact. Jim Detweiler, who was from Toledo, Carl Ward, who was from Cincinnati, Mel Anthony was from Cincinnati. A lot of players on our Michigan teams were from Ohio. And so that fueled the rivalry. But it seemed that Ohio State wanted to beat Michigan, but Michigan wanted to beat Woody Hayes. And so those games took precedence over all of the others, even though during my period there, Purdue was the hot team.
Yeah.
And Bob Greasy and I came out of school the same year. But and of course, Michigan State had Clint Jones and Gene Washington and Duffy Doherty. There's some great players during that period of time that I was there. But I was lucky. I played in a defensive backfield that was coached by Don James, and Don James went to the University of Washington, and that's where he really made his name. But in that backfield that I was in, there was John Rouser, who was a cornerback, and Rick Volk, who went to Baltimore.
Great player,
yeah. Frank London went to the 49ers. We had a good bunch of people. John Henderson, who went to Detroit and then to the Vikings. So we had a pretty good team. But we had injuries that second year, our junior year. We went to the Rose Bowl our sophomore year, but then that in our junior year we had injuries that we never recovered from. But you're right. The highlight of that experience was beating Ohio State 2 out of 3 times that we played them.
So at Michigan, if you'd finished 1-9, 1-10, whatever, how many games you were playing at the time, and beat Michigan in that one game, that would have been a successful season, do you think?
Beat Ohio State, absolutely, absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
You feel like the rivalry is as strong and as it was then?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yes. You know, coaches retain their jobs particularly in Ohio. They retain their jobs based on what they do against Michigan. And I know Lloyd Carr lost to Ohio State, and he was a coach at Michigan. He's not looked upon too favorably because of all the years that he lost to Ohio State.
The same way at Ohio State. John Cooper had a great career there, and I think he was like 1-7 or something against Michigan. I feel like Ryan Day could win the national championship this year. If he loses to Michigan, he might get fired. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. That rivalry, though, is really something.
You feel like the Woody and Bo thing really ramped it up, or it was just, yeah.
No, it was Woody and Bo, and I think it was primarily Bo who really ramped it up because I think he coached under Woody. He came from Miami of Ohio to Michigan, and he ramped it up. And man, was he tough! I'm glad I wasn't there when he was there, but he was tough.
I was going to ask you if you had your druthers, would you like to have played for Bo Schembechler? And so, no.
I don't know. He came in the year after I graduated.
Right.
And obviously you can't knock success. He was successful at Michigan, and that real tradition of winning was really developed because of Bo.
So he was, and I know how Bo was. He was much. I don't know that much about Bump Elliott as how his coaching style is. He was that much different than Bo from your experience.
Oh yeah. He was a little more laid back. He had come out of Iowa, as a matter of fact, and I think when Bo took over, he went back to Iowa as athletic director. But we had good coaches and sound coaching styles. I don't know if Bump was as fiery, and sometimes when you get a lot of academics involved, I don't know if you can, if it's die or do, and I don't think it was that with Bump's teams.
Yeah,
but we had great athletes, great athletes.
So defense is where you played. You did not play in, at least a few downs at quarterback even, and I know you played a little bit of halfback. What led you to playing quarterback? Injuries, or what was this? What was the circumstances?
Well, I was in high school a big fish in a small pond. Yeah. But then when you go to and you make all-state honors and things of this sort, and you go to a major school like Michigan, they've got a lot of all-staters.
Yeah.
And they can only put, you get great athletes, but you can only put 11 men on offense and 11 men on defense on the field at one time. And so the real knack from a coaching standpoint is making use of the athletes that you have. In high school, I never played an ounce of cornerback or defense. But when I went to Michigan, and if I wanted to play, I was either going to be a running back or I was going to find another position. Yeah. And this is where Don James came in. In high school, I ran the ball all the time, but never learned to block. And it was a must when you get into college that your backs have to be able to block. And so when Don James came in, he must have recognized something. And he said, if you're going to play, you're going to have to be, at your size, a defensive back. And so he switched me from a running back to a defensive back, and I played the right side. And as I mentioned, John Rouser, who was the running back, he played the left side. And Rick Volk, who came in as a quarterback, he'd never played defense before. He became a safety. And so we meshed into a pretty good group. And I thank Don James for recognizing or wanting to get all of us on the field because of our own athletic ability. And I'm indebted to him for making that move for me in particular. It got me noticed by the Packers when I got drafted.
Excellent. We're going to touch on that in a second. Let's say good morning to Danny. Danny Fuller's out in L.A., or he's up early. He comes up early for our shows, and he wants to say good morning, and he thinks you're a complete gentleman and a stud. So I didn't say stud earlier. I apologize. Danny will handle that. So thanks, Danny. So did you expect to get drafted coming out of college?
Well, I had always wanted to make sure that I got my degree. And I didn't think about playing professionally until really my senior year, having started all of my games during my junior year and all of my games during my senior year, and having some luck against Ohio State with several interceptions. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll try this thing. And I began to worry because I didn't get drafted that first day. I got drafted in the second day in the 12th round by the Packers. And so my chances of making it in the pros was nil, so to speak. But I wanted the experience. I'd never been one to say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. And because I wasn't a major draft choice, I ended up studying more and more and more and more, and recognizing that even with somewhat limited ability, if you didn't make mental mistakes and the coach could count on you not to make those mental mistakes, you had an opportunity to make a team at your position or maybe even on special teams. But also, I really wanted to have that experience with Coach Vince Lombardi. And I actually ended up playing in a number of exhibition games, but he cut me. Coach Lombardi cut me the last cut before the season began, which was really too late to be picked up by anybody else on their regular roster. And so I was going to go back to Michigan and get an additional degree. And the Lions called and said, well, why don't you come to Detroit, since it was so close? And I said, okay. But the thing that kept me going was that Coach Lombardi actually said, when he cut me, he said, Michael, you can play in this league. And so hopefully you will not give it up, because when I was at Green Bay, they had Herb Adderley, Willie Wood, Bob Jeter, and John Rouser had been drafted in the third round, my teammate from Michigan. So my chances, I expected to get cut early on, and I made it to the last cut. And with Coach Lombardi saying, Mike, you can play in this league, that was a great inspiration to me. Although it was disappointing and going to Detroit after spending 2 years on their cab squad, their taxi squad, never getting an opportunity. I did learn. I learned from Dick LeBeau. I learned who was a cornerback there, and also Lim Barney, who was a cornerback on the other side. But we were just fodder on the taxi squad. We were just fodder for the team. But my one claim to fame, though, in Detroit was that Garo Yepremian and I were there at the same time.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, we were there at the same time on their cab squad, and neither one of us could make the team, according to them. And so we left Detroit the same year, and I went to Washington, and he went to Miami, and we have been friends all those many years, not only in Detroit but also in Washington, and when he was in Miami. We're joined at the hip, so to speak.
We'll certainly get into what where the world came to know you two guys as a combo here in a little bit. So your time in Detroit was good for your development, I guess, as a football player. As you move on from there to Washington, you're obviously Coach Lombardi. His last year, he was coaching that team. Was he instrumental in you coming to Washington? How did that come about?
Absolutely. When I was, first of all, Detroit was never a good team in those years. And I was brought up to the regular squad with 2 games left in one of the seasons I was there, when you needed 3 games to qualify for your pension. And I kind of held that against them because the person I replaced was a receiver who had been hurt for the entire year, and they waited until there were only 2 games left in the season to bring me up. So after that, I just knew I needed to get away from Detroit. And my wife and I sat down and we wrote to every team. And 2 days after the letters went out, I got a call from Washington, and it was Coach Lombardi himself. And he said, "Mike, I want you to come to Washington." And that's all he had to say. And had he said, "We're going to pay you 1 cent per year," I still would have gone. He was that kind of dynamic fella, and just a great, great coach. And I went to Washington, and in that first week, he made me a starter. And he was always behind me. I felt that way, and that I really felt like I might have been one of his favorites, because the only thing that he would ask me to do is not play so hard in practice, because I might hurt Charlie Taylor or one of those other dynamic receivers that we had. And so I became a starter, and I remained at that spot for 7 years.
Well, Coach Lombardi, I mean, the Redskins hadn't been terribly successful in the years leading up to Coach Lombardi going there, and they had a winning record for the first time in quite some time, I think, that first year, and turned things around. That's right. Was there any indication that at that point in time that he was ill during that 1969, I guess?
No, there wasn't, except for the fact that he was always popping these anti-acid pills. That was the only thing that may have led us to believe that he was having some problems. But after that first season, and I worked for the government, we had to work in the off season. We didn't make any damn money. We went on strike, though, 3 times to get these kids the money that they're and the benefits they're getting now.
I'd like to.
I have a whole new thought on all of those things, but
we'll get into that later for sure.
Yeah, but it was kind of Coach Lombardi was like the father that you didn't want to let down. I mean, he could do everything he wanted to you, but because you had such respect for him, you took it. Even the old guys like Sonny Jurgensen, they quelled, they acquiesced no matter what he said, and he treated everybody the same. There were really no favorites, but he noticed everything, and even though he treated everybody the same, or it appeared that way, he knew how to push each person's budget, each button. Yeah. And when he said something to you, you thought he was really talking to you. You thought that he was going to make you better than you even thought you could ever be. And he was that kind of motivating figure. And his systems were very simple. He started out with, this is a football. And we're going to run 5 plays to the right and run 5 plays to the left. And we're going to throw 5 passes to the right and 5 passes to the left. And then the variations came off of those. But you perfected those few plays to the point where no matter what you came up with against, it was going to be successful.
I don't know if this comparison works for you, but I had always thought, based on what you were just talking about, that he was a little bit like John Wooden was at UCLA in basketball and the way he prepared a team. Does that?
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Except John Wooden was a little low key.
Yeah, personality was
bombastic. Yeah. He was bombastic. And again, it was the mental mistakes. No mental mistakes.
So, and I got to believe, as people became aware that Coach Lombardi was sick, and I guess the inevitability of his situation struck, it had to affect you and the rest of the team in a great way.
Oh yeah, he was there in '69. In '70, we just had a miserable season, and prior to the season starting, we went to his funeral up in New York. It was a somber. It hit us hard. It really hit us hard. And Bill Austin became the coach, and he didn't have the respect.
Yeah.
And he didn't earn the respect. He did not earn the respect either. And there are stories about Bill Austin that we won't go into as well.
He was on the staff and just took over after Coach Lombardi got sick. Is that how it worked out? Yeah.
It was. He got the job of head coach after Lombardi passed away because he had been a coach under Lombardi in Green Bay, and then he had been the head coach in Pittsburgh. And then, of course, he got, I don't know if he was fired from Pittsburgh, but Coach Lombardi brought him to Washington as well. But I'm glad I didn't have to play for him. My defensive coach was Harlan Savari, who was a great guy, great guy. And my position coach was a coach by the name of Don Dahl, who again was a great coach in my opinion. But we had just a disastrous season. And thankfully, the Redskins decided that they needed another coach. And that's when they went out and got George Allen.
Before we go into George, we certainly want to get into George Allen because he's a character all of a different sort. Right? That 70s season, I mean, and without going too much into detail, because it doesn't sound like you want to do that, and I don't want to push you there. You think the failures of that year were tied more to the emotions of Coach Lombardi's passing, or to the Bill Austin situation, or just a combination of the both?
More so, I think it had to do with Coach Lombardi, because we had a winning season for the first time in years the season before. Mm-hmm. And we just had great expectations for the upcoming season. And it was because of Coach Lombardi. He was the heart of all of us. We played for him more so than playing for the team of Washington. We played for Coach Lombardi. We sacrificed. We would have done anything just to get him to say, "Good job, Mike," or "Good job, Sonny," or play it, "Did you check this off, John?" Or with Larry Brown, he noticed that he had a hearing problem, and he picked that up. Just little things that, and Coach Lombardi saw everything. He even remembered the one of the sweaters my wife had on after meeting her at some point in time. He just knew everything, and it was no question as to who was running that team, and there was no question that you were either going to follow his instructions or you were going to be somewhere else. It's such a motivator in every sense of the word.
Sure, obviously one of the great influences in all of professional football through the years, for sure. Before I move on to George Allen taking over, I want to remind everybody my guest this morning is Mike Bass, former known mostly for his time with the Redskins and a member of their Hall of Fame. Guys, if you got questions, I'll certainly put them up in a bit. I just don't want to kind of get out of the flow. And I know there's a couple about some things we already talked about, so I'll address those when we get to them. George Allen comes in, totally different character, I'm sure, than anybody we've talked about so far. And we talked about the Over the Hill gang, and I don't know if he had a first-round draft pick the entire time he was there, or maybe even draft picks at all. But Over the Hill gang was, but there were some young guys like yourself and Larry Brown, you mentioned, that were key parts of that team. Tell us about George coming in and your thoughts as he came in, and what you thought was going to happen, and did you foresee the success that was on the way?
Well, George was a different kind of coach than Coach Lombardi, but he was just as enthusiastic, and it was a foregone conclusion with George that we were going to win. And it's just that he was going to win in a different way. First of all, George was an absolute players coach. He loved his players, and it came across. He was at the same time, he was not a coach that interfered with the abilities of the players that he had. He respected the fact that if we were going to win, we were going to win because, one, we did not make mistakes, and that was major in keeping our defensive backfield together. For example, in that backfield, that first year with George, it was myself, Pat Fisher, Brig Owens, and Rosie Taylor. All of us were experienced. And because George believed that it was defense that won games, his emphasis was on stopping the offensive teams that we were going against, which meant a lot of different variations of defenses that really a young player just could not pick up. And if you couldn't pick the intricacies up of the defense, you were going to make mental mistakes. Mm-hmm. And George knew this, and he said, well, let someone else train these players, and I'll get them after 5 years when they know something about playing football. And he left no stone unturned. He would spend the money to get whatever he needed. I think the owner of the Redskins at the time was Edward Bennett Williams. And Edward Bennett Williams said, I gave George an unlimited budget and he exceeded it. He was that kind of guy. And there was no secret in the fact that he would tell the offense, okay, offense, you guys go out there and hold them. And the defense will do something to win the game. And more often than not, that was the case. The defense kept us in every game. And we as athletes, we were older, a bit slower, but we never made mental mistakes. And that's when I really, really, really learned football. All aspects of being a pro and playing my position as a cornerback.
He brought, if my memory's correct, I mean, again, we talked about the veterans coming in. He brought more than a handful of guys from the Rams with him, didn't he?
He brought 11 guys.
No, that's more.
He brought 11 guys from the Rams, and they all played key positions. We were for a time called Ramskins rather than the Redskins, and they all contributed immediately because they knew George's system, and it was the system that made the difference. Even though we might have been slower, we were our experience allowed us to react as if we were twice as fast and twice as quick as we really were. And he respected that. He did respect that.
Veteran, and again, speaking of veterans, at quarterback, he had two really skilled veterans in Billy Kilmer and Sonny Jurgensen. Was there any? Mm-hmm. Was there a quarterback controversy for real? Did it hurt the team at all? I know Billy Kilmer probably had overall in your time at least had the most success there. What were your thoughts on that situation, the quarterback situation?
There was never a quarterback controversy in that both Billy and Sonny respected each other as pros, and they were all pros. And Billy was brought in as a backup, but Sonny got hurt, and Billy took over. Billy was like a linebacker. He's going to go into a foxhole with. Yeah. He was he wasn't a pretty thrower, but he won, and George put the athletes around him to help win. Larry Brown, Charlie Haraway, and as running backs. There was always Charlie Taylor, and he brought in Roy Jefferson. I think was one of the most underrated receivers in all of the National Football League.
Yeah. And you start winning right away. I mean, you had a really good year in 71 and went out early in the playoffs, but 72, you obviously make the run all the way to the Super Bowl. there's a lot. In fact, the question comes up here. People forget the Dolphins were undefeated, and you guys had whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What you can remind me, 3 or 4 losses, maybe. I don't remember. Maybe 2. But your favorite in that game going in. What was that? What was that season like in that game? Obviously, we know what happened with Garo Yepremian, and the only points the TT team scored was on a blocked kick or a fumbled kick, and he tries to throw it. You intercept it, run it back for a touchdown, which had to be a great moment. Talk about all of that for me, if you would. I know there's a lot there.
You're absolutely right. We were favored in that game, and we had a decent season, but we had lost 3 or 4 games. But we went through the playoffs without any trouble, beating the Cowboys and the Packers. And again, we held the Dolphins to 14 points. And at that time, if you held a team to 14 points, you should win. But a number of things went awry with us. One of them was a pass to Jerry Smith that hit the crossbar, and this was at a time when the crossbar was on the goal line itself. And the Dolphins' defense, they were good. They were called the no-name defense, and I think that they were just a little quicker than our offensive line. And so we weren't able to score, actually, and by a fluke, an opportunistic situation with Garo and the emphasis that George put on special teams. We blocked that field goal attempt. Garo made thought he was going to become the next quarterback for the Dolphins and tried to throw the ball, and I was able to pick it up and score. So we lost 14-7. But you're right. We were favored to win. Unfortunately, our offense didn't perform as we anticipated.
Yeah.
But we got to the Super Bowl, and we set up the tradition of winning in Washington after that.
Did you feel like after the game, the way the offense struggled, that the Dolphins were a better team, or that you should have won the game? Did you catch me there, Mike? Mike might have frozen on me. I hear him clicking around. Can you hear me, Mike? Mike. We lost Mike for a second. He'll be back, I think. We'll talk about that. Danny, we'll certainly get to your questions here, because they are certainly relevant. I know there's a couple here about that 72 season that we'll talk about. My guest today is Mike Bass, former. Then there's Mike trying to come back. Let me take him out of here and put him back in. There you are. Are you back, Mike?
Yep, I'm back. Yep.
All right, cool. I was getting to you finished up your comments there on that game. The game itself. Danny had mentioned he doesn't. Many people, himself included, don't think that the 72 Dolphin team was necessarily the best team of all time. I mean, do you feel like even after that loss, you feel like you were a better team than the Dolphins?
Well, I think so. We keep going in and out here, and I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you right now. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because we played the Dolphins the following year and beat them the following year when they came to Washington. Sonny was the quarterback, and we manhandled them. But for some reason or other, we just didn't rise to the occasion in that particular Super Bowl.
What about yourself? I mean, do you feel like that play with Garo is it's, to me, I think, and to a lot of people, I think it's probably the defining moment in Mike Bass's career, what people remember most. And you had a really fine career. And to me, it's a little, I don't want to say demeaning, because it's a great play and people remember it. So that's a great thing. But you feel like you should be defined by that play because you had a really fine career other than just that moment in time.
No, everybody remembers that play, I think, because it was the Super Bowl. But I thought that I did, especially being a 12th round draft choice.
Yeah.
Cut twice, actually 3 times. Cut by Lombardi in Green Bay, cut by Detroit twice, and still ended up playing actually what amounted to almost 10 years.
Yeah.
My mom always said that self-praise is no recommendation at all, but I'm satisfied with the career that I had. I had 30 interceptions in that 10-year period, excluding those 2 in Detroit. I gave up only 8 touchdown passes in that period of time. And I thought that was pretty good. I covered some of the best receivers in the National Football League. Bob Hayes, Paul Warfield. These guys were no slouches. And I played against Charlie Taylor every day in practice. Same with Roy Jefferson. So that helped an awful lot. Plus the scheme that George gave us helped as well. We fooled a lot of quarterbacks into making mistakes.
Yeah, I feel like you're going to agree with what I have to say here. Is when it comes to cornerbacks specifically and interceptions, people get excited by high interception numbers. There was a guy with the Cowboys last year. I can't remember his name, but he had a big game on maybe it was Thanksgiving. I don't know. But my point was always really good cornerbacks don't have a lot of interceptions because quarterbacks don't throw at them.
No.
Right?
Well, that's exactly right. You find a cornerback who has a lot of interceptions. That's somebody they're throwing at.
Yeah.
So the interceptions that we got, Pat Fisher, and by the way, I most of my career played with Kenny Houston, who is in the Hall of Fame. They came off of the fact that we fooled quarterbacks into throwing where they thought something was open and it wasn't open.
Yeah.
And I credit not only Brig Owens that I played with and Kenny Houston, but also Chris Hamburger, who was on my side. And that was fantastic having him there as well. So we led the league, I think, in interceptions 1 or 2 years. But again, it wasn't so much that people were throwing at any particular player as the fact that these quarterbacks were fooled.
Great. Yeah, that year, 72, you actually beat the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game. And I got thinking, that was obviously a huge rivalry throughout. It's been a huge rivalry for a long time, but through the 70s, it was, I think, at a different level. How does that compare with, you were in college with one of the great college rivalries, as we've already talked about with Ohio State. How those two rivalries compare in your mind? Because you were involved in both of them so closely.
Well, this rivalry became a real rivalry when George came in.
Yeah.
He personified hate of the Cowboys, and that kind of rubbed off. Those damn Cowboys. I mean, he got up for those, particularly those games against the Cowboys, and I think because Landry got a lot of credit for the success of the Cowboys, and that's one of the things that he didn't like. And so it was always a feather in his cap to beat the Cowboys. And so we hated the Cowboys because George hated the Cowboys. And it showed. And I don't know if it was that much of a rivalry with the Cowboys, but and George got us up for those games. I mean, there was no game like the game against the Cowboys, whether it was during the regular season, during the playoffs, and he disliked anything related, Staubach and the rest of them.
Do you think? And I know George stayed there after you were gone. I think he got fired after a 10-win season. I mean, you guys kept winning. You didn't always win a division or make the playoffs. Cowboys always seemed to come into play there, obviously, somewhere along the line. Cardinals were good for a while during that stretch. Did George kind of wear out his welcome, you think, in Washington? I know you were gone by then, but I'm sure so close to some of the guys.
Among the players, no. George could never wear out his welcome with the players. He was a player's coach. At the same time, he could get under the thin skin of the owners because he didn't care about money.
Yeah.
He except that he needed money to win. And he would keep players maybe a couple years past their prime because he was dedicated to the players. And we go back to why we had the strikes and the greed of the owners. And George was not a owner's man. He was a player's man. He was a player's coach. And he did not mind going to battle against ownership in favor of the players. And the owners have egos too. And I'm sure that they didn't like being challenged because George would challenge you because he had the record to back up what he was saying. And it got to the point where I think there was a clash of egos. But George will always remain high in the minds of his players, just because he was as dedicated to them, as we were dedicated to him.
We talked about. I talked about you not being there at the end of George's run, but your career ended, I would say, prematurely. I think is the right word. You had a neck injury. Talk to us about what happened and your decision to retire when you did at a fairly young age of 30.
Yeah. Well, we were playing a game against the Giants. And at 6 feet and 192, 95, the running backs were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you always remember these things. And I was coming up to make a tackle on Joe Dawkins. And again, we all remember specific things in our career that make a difference. And in making the tackle, my head was just a little too low. And I hit him wrong as his thighs were coming up. And I tore all the muscles across the back of my neck and down my spine. And it hurt. It was the only real injury I ever got in the pros. And I ended up being carried off the field. But being in the mold of Coach Lombardi said there's a difference between pain and injury. And injury is when a bone is sticking out. Pain is simply you have problems with muscles and so forth. So you can always play. So I came back and played the next game against the Cardinals, and which kept my streak alive because I ended up playing 104 straight games during my career in Washington. And the doctor of the team said that
looks we got
with most pro teams, a hurt first stringer is always better than a well second stringer because of your knowledge and because of the playing with the same people, the voices you hear when you change defenses, I could tell Chris Hanberger's voice in my sleep. Same thing with Kenny Houston. And our defenses were so sophisticated that we could change defenses even after the ball was snapped. So I went on to play that game, and I actually ended up causing a fumble on I think an Ohio State fullback by the name of Jim Otis. I was able to cause a fumble, but I was hurting, and I was hurting throughout the remainder of the season. And I remember in one of the last games of the season, and this was in 1975, a player for Dallas, I think Golden Richards, I think his name was, ran a quick out, and I came up to make the tackle, and I again hit him wrong. And I felt that entire pain around my neck. And he ended up breaking the tackle and going for a touchdown. And that bothered the hell out of me. But I came back the next year, and during training camp, I got hit in the head again. And I said, hell, I've been out here 10 damn years. Why should I risk permanent injury? And I did not want to be put out to pasture. I wanted to quit on my own terms. And I after that particular practice, I said, I'm really bucking the odds here, especially with a neck injury. And football is great, but football is not always the means to an end. And I walked away. And just to give you an idea, I had to sue the Redskins for my salary for that year. That really put it kind of a bitter taste in my mouth. All is forgiven now, but that was so I'm glad I walked away when I walked away.
Yeah. So you were ready. You never missed a game. You talked about, never being injured. I'm sure you had pain through the years that you played with the Redskins. But as far as I know, even with that injury, you never missed a game.
I never missed a game.
Yeah. That's impressive. Tell me, after your playing career, did you have interest in staying in a game, coaching, or in? We lost Mike again real quick. I'm sure he'll be right back, unless he's had enough of me. Danny remembers that play. Sorry, I didn't see that when it was up there, Danny. But we'll get back to that when Mike comes back. I want to finish up with his post career. I see Mike popping back in here.
Yeah, we're back in. Yep, I never missed a game. 104 straight games.
Very impressive. Very impressive. So it's you had come to grips, it sounds like, with the fact that you needed to retire to protect your future health.
Well, it helped having a doctor as a father too.
Yeah,
I was realistic about that.
Yeah. Did you, Mike, when you retired, did you have any thoughts of staying in the game, coaching or capacity?
No, that part of my life I left behind. It's a business as well as a game. I got to realize my childhood dream of getting paid to play a game, but I knew the sacrifices that you had to make in order to be a good football coach.
Yeah,
and I was not willing to make those sacrifices, and having had to sue the Redskins for my salary, that was the other side of the game that I really didn't want any part of, and that's my only real regret. But again, that was 50 years ago, almost 60 years ago,
roughly.
Yeah.
after you retire, you did have you have an interesting resume after retired. I mentioned to you when I first reached out to you that, and I'll let the folks know that I met Mike Bass in '82 or '83. I can't remember. He was running a little place outside a Holiday Inn in Freeport, Nassau, kind of a bar and grill. I don't know what you call it, but we had a lot of fun there. I know Mike doesn't remember me, and I don't expect him to, but we had a lot of fun that day. And you did some other things too. What caused you to move to Nassau, number one, and then talk about a little bit some of the other things you've done in your retirement?
Well, actually, I used to go to Freeport on Grand Bahama. Upcoming season. And so I for the island friendly. And so I ended up on a small place there, a little place that asked. And it was as well.
Yeah, Mike popping in out just a little bit.
Okay. Well, yep, let's see. Yep, I ended up spending 18 years there in the Bahamas, in Freeport. 18 years, right? I coached football for a few years. And we won several Bahamian American Football League championships. That was a lot of fun. Cool. That was a lot of fun. And and I still go back to Freeport. My players are now obviously middle-aged men, but we had a great time, a really, really great time. And I just enjoyed being in the islands, and particularly the Bahamas. And if ever one is thinking about a vacation, that is one of the places I would suggest.
Yeah, we've been there a few times, and we cruise a lot, but that'll be one of the stops will be the Bahamas. Always a cool place to go. You mentioned earlier. Sorry, you mentioned earlier a few of the strikes you were involved with, and alluded to the guys today, and hoping they appreciate what you guys went through, making no money, putting your bodies at risk, and fighting for the future. What are your thoughts? You mentioned you had some thoughts on that. I'm curious what they were. And I might have lost Mike again. We were doing good for a while, connection-wise, with Mike. I don't want to kick him out so he'll come back, but he may be doing. There you go. Are you back, Mike, or not? It's that Florida internet, I gotta believe, is the problem. I don't know. We think he was on Nassau or Freeport. Sorry. I think maybe Mike will be back. We'll finish up with him here in a second. Dan, there he is back already. There you are again. I think your internet's kicking in and out, but I had to ask you, Mike. Yeah. Earlier, you'd mentioned about the sacrifices your generation made, strike-wise, making no money, and obviously today guys are making money hand over fist. And you mentioned you had some. I don't know if it was a change in opinion on some of that, but do you think the guys appreciate what, or even recognize what the generations before them sacrificed for them?
Well, I don't think so. And really, I don't even think the Players Association recognizes or appreciates what we did as players. That is the current Players Association. When you compare our pension to the pensions in Major League Baseball and also in basketball, it's really not a fair comparison. We make so little, and we take such great risks.
Yeah, Mike's having some serious internet problems right now. We'll get him back and we'll try to wrap it up, and I'll try to get to some of your questions if we can, guys. If we can't, I'll do my best to answer them. Some of them we talked about previously. I know Rick's got his normal. Let's see if Mike's back.
Yeah, here we go. I don't know. The internet is going wild today.
I hope you don't have a hurricane coming or something down there. Jeez.
Yeah, right. But I was saying that our pension is absolutely terrible, and I don't think we get the support from the Players Association. And I recall Gene Upshaw advising all of us that he didn't represent the retired players, and so we're thrown crumbs, so to speak, and it's no comparison to what the Major League Baseball players and the NBA players get in support. It's almost disgraceful. And, even if the existing players would even contribute directly to the retired players, 0.5% of whatever they're giving, it could bring us in line with the retired players of the other major sports. And obviously, our risks are so much greater than the risks that the are taking in those other major sports. It's not a plea, and it's not a handout. We sacrificed so that these players could get what they're getting now, and these owners and their teams could become as valuable as they are now. And I think that we were punished. Those players who played before 1993 were punished for what we did in striking to bring to the current players what they're getting now. And it's amazing that everybody could agree that those players who played before 1993 are not going to get what those players are getting now who are playing after 1993. And so that little 0.5% could make a big difference. Sure. And right now, let's be honest, even if they took advantage, even if they said to the 1993 players, we're going to do more for you and bring you in line, the cost to these owners and the players would not be that much because we're all dying off. There are not that many of us left. I'm 79 years old. So it wouldn't really hurt them to, at least in our later years, kind of make up for how badly they treated us.
Well, Rick Sherlock brings up Byron Williams, who's a really good friend of the show and very involved in the, I don't know if you know Byron, very involved in the Players Association. I know that. Whether he would disagree on the appreciation or not, and I'll have Byron on if he can give his side at some point himself. But I've had other guys like yourself. Just a year ago, I had interviewed Delvin Williams. I don't know if you know Delvin.
Yeah.
He's been involved with lawsuits against the NFL, and I think he was told the same thing by Gene Upshaw as you, that we don't represent the retired players. And I think that's BS. I think you represent everybody who played ever. That's what a union should be. So I agree with you.
And that the quarterback, when we were trying to bring these issues to the front, like the quarterback for the Saints who just retired made some comment about us retired players being greedy. He has since changed his tune. He recognized that he put his foot in his mouth.
Yeah.
And sometimes
nobody today should be mentioning the word greed with anybody from the past. That's for sure.
Yeah, right.
Look at people earn. I'm a strong believer in if somebody's willing to pay you, then great. Then fine, you deserve what you get. But don't talk like that. That's just crazy talk.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm going to get to a couple of these. There's a couple things here that we didn't. We'll let you go here in a second. I know you're having trouble with the internet and whatnot, but let me just see if there's a couple of things I can bring up that we haven't touched on. We talked about the rivalry to Ohio State, so we won't go there. Danny's asking about the Brotherhood of Death, which I have no idea what that is. He wants to know if you still continue to correspond with any.
Well, I'm trying to forget that one too. Roy Jefferson talked me into being a part of a film called the Brotherhood of Death, which did real well overseas. It was centered around the group around the Vietnam War and fighting in the jungles of Vietnam. And if you looked, if you looked hard enough, you could see the cars in the background on the highway. I happen to think Roy Jefferson was one of the finest receivers in all of football, but I hold that against him for getting me involved in that film. I call it a film because it wasn't even a movie. It was just a film.
I know. I'm very good at finding these obscure movies. I got to find this out.
Well, I wish you hadn't found that.
Danny knows everything. I'm telling you right now, he's the best. Let's see what else is up here. He mentioned actually going back to that Super Bowl with the Dolphins, that interception by Jake Scott in the end zone. You guys didn't have a lot of offense, and one of the best drives you had that whole day was ended by Jake Scott with that interception late. I'm not sure what part of the game. I think it was early in the fourth quarter. I feel like it was, but. Edward Williams was the owner wasn't the owner of the Redskins when you retired. The heck was his name? He had three names. Didn't he sell the team? Ed Williams had sold the team by the time you retired, correct?
No, he was still the owner. We called him EBW, and I remember him telling me, "We will tell you when to retire. You won't retire on your own. We will tell you when to retire." And that goes back to football as a business.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, I had to fight for that last year's salary.
So you never played for Walter or Jack Hancock? As the owner?
No, he may have been a part owner, but he wasn't the major owner that I know of. It was always EBW, Edward Bennett Williams.
Fair enough. And Rick talks about this is his weekly question pretty much who was the craziest guy that you played with on that Over the Hill squad?
There were all those guys that came from the Rams were crazy. Dyron Talbert, Myron Cadios. Yeah. They were all a little nuts, so to speak. They were different, and they brought to the team a jovial, let's get the job done, and it rubbed off on all of us, especially coming off of the disciplinarian that Coach Lombardi was, but. When it was time to get down to work, we knew that no matter how much laughing and so forth went on, when it was time to play, nobody made mental errors, nobody made mistakes, and it was a team effort, and we pulled for each other. It was just those types of teams and teammates that made the big difference. And so when you talk about a team being close, and I was among the youngsters of the team, I didn't have a whole lot to say. I just went out and did whatever my job called for. It was just different with those guys. And again, those guys who came from the Rams, they were nuts. They were nuts. Great teammates.
Pat Fisher was one of those guys, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. But he was with us, though. Pat was old like them, but he was among the old Redskins. When the new Redskins came in, we all joined in that jovial atmosphere. And I remember Verlin Biggs coming in from the Jets. And he was very solemn, very quiet, but then he played next to Dyron Talbert and Ron McDowell and Bill Brundage. But McDowell, Talbert, they made it a lot of fun. And you could see Verlin coming out of his shell. And he became one of the jokesters on the entire team, just being with a group of fellas in which we all respected each other and each other's ability, and how important being a teammate with Washington at the time.
Danny talks about your favorite win as a Redskin. He thinks he knows what it is. I think I do. We guessed the 72 NFC Championship game. What was your favorite game as a Redskin?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Beating the Packers, and then beating particularly the Cowboys in the championship game. And we put it on them too. We put it on them.
But was there a favorite place you liked to play? I mean, obviously RFK Stadium, which was called at the time, right? I think.
Yeah.
Was a great place to play home games. Was there a place you liked to play outside of that stadium?
No. RFK Stadium and its fans were right on the field. And it was an old baseball stadium during the baseball season. And the fans, they were just right on the field. And, I could walk up and shake hands with some of my friends who were at the game. There was nothing like playing at RFK.
It's funny. The stories go that the president at the time, Richard Nixon, used to diagram plays and send them to George Allen. Do we know if any of those were ever used?
No, they were never used. But George was a...
Yeah. If he goes, we'll get him back.
Yeah, hopefully. And most coaches and football players are somewhat conservative, but nothing like this group that is being led now.
Yeah,
and that's a whole story.
I'll just throw this up there. Rick was talking about appreciation, not financial, when he was talking about the Players Association. I would argue they're kind of tied together, but that's fine. And just Danny wants to let you know at 79 years old, you look amazing, no doubt, Mike Bass. And he also wants you to know he's still
I appreciate it. My wife takes good care of me. She says she's not going to let me get old.
That's obvious. I got a few years to catch up with you, but I'm getting there fast, so I hope I'm in as good a shape as you. He does say he's still watching the Brotherhood of Death, by the way. So oh, crap. I hope he comes back one more time. We'll wrap this up. I don't know if we're going to get that last question of yours, Danny. I want to wrap it up with Mike if he comes back. He's probably getting tired of popping in and out. I got to find this Brotherhood of Death. I got to write myself a note right now. I don't know if Mike's coming back this time. There he is. No, he's not. Brotherhood of Death. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Here, Mike's back one more time. Good. I was afraid you might have got tired of popping back in and out. I promise you we'll wrap it up here. I wanted to let you know that Danny says he's still watching the Brotherhood of Death, by the way. So you're going to have two people watching it. If you're getting ridiculous, people check, I guess. Oh, God. Danny says he's loved this interview, and I have too, Mike. I'm going to wrap it up. I know you're having some issues there. It's probably getting to be a pain for you.
Yeah.
I do appreciate you coming on and spending time with us. I appreciate your career. I know a lot of my fans do because as old as I am, my demographic is people that remember the Mike Basses of the world and appreciate them a lot. So
I thank you. I thank you, Keith, for inviting me. I really do. It's been a great opportunity, great chance.
And everybody check out the links that I put in there, and it'll go with the groups that I share this to. Mike can share some links with me. Check those links out. And I don't know where they go to, Mike. I didn't check them out myself yet, but what were the URLs you gave me?
Well, one of them, I have a newsletter which I call Mike's Right Corner. Yeah. And each week I send out something relating to my career or something relating to football in general. I do have a merchandise and apparel line. Oh, cool. There is a website called Millions. If one goes to millions.com and puts in my name, it'll bring up that site for hats, T-shirts, and things of that sort. And then I have a personal website, which is MikeBass41.com. So I'd appreciate everybody taking a look and certainly and dropping me a line.
Yeah, reach out to Mike, and guys, I'll be sharing those links again outside of this broadcast too. So we'll post them separately just so that they don't get lost in the description of the show. Mike, I appreciate your time so much today. One of the great Redskins, great Hall of Famer, one of the top 53 players. I know you were named as the 53-man roster of the Washington Redskins. Lots of great stuff, and we appreciate you coming and spending some time with us. Thanks, Mike. And guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. Mike can hang in there. And guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining in and having your questions available as always. You guys are great. We'll see you next. We'll see you next on Sunday with the Sunday Stream of Consciousness. And next week, Brian McCray, former MLB outfielder, will join us. You guys have a great day, great weekend, and we'll see you Sunday morning. So enjoy. Bye-bye.